Welcome everybody to Bible Bites. I'm Pastor Dan. We are reading through the Bible one small bite at a time. Now, in previous videos, I have mentioned that Jesus left Galilee for the last time. He's making his way to Jerusalem, where he will be crucified. And Jesus actually tells his disciples this rather plainly. We read that in our last video. We read Jesus' words about that. So this is the last account then that Matthew gives us before Jesus arrives at Jerusalem. So let's go ahead and pick this up here in verse 29. And as they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed him. Often Jesus had to deal with crowds. They would form around him. Jericho is a city which you may remember. There's a story about that in the Old Testament. The Israelites marching around the city walls and the walls falling. This was one of the first cities, if not the first city, that Israel conquered as they went into Canaan. Of course, that city was rebuilt. So this is where they're at, or at least maybe leaving there. It says, and behold, there were two blind men sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. So they are crying out pretty loudly, so that Jesus might hear their voice in the midst of the crowd and the talking that's going on and all the noises. And they're calling Jesus Son of David, which is a messianic title. They're confessing that Jesus is the Messiah. And I want to mention that the plight of those who had some disability in that day was really hard. They didn't have programs of assistance, really. These people relied, I say these people meaning those with a disability, even those who had diseases that were considered very contagious, like leprosy or something. People really, these folks relied very much on the generosity of others, or relied on relatives if relatives could care for them or they had relatives. But I do think that such people were often seen as insignificant, were often overlooked. They were not definitely the important people. And so, we get the picture that the idea here that these two men were probably sitting alongside the road begging. It was the only way that they had of getting any money to purchase their next meal. And so the crowds really, they're not to be bothered. That's kind of their mentality is not to, let's not let these men bother us or Jesus. And so as these men are crying out, it says verse 31, the crowds rebuked them, like, hey, you need to be quiet. the teacher is talking. However, they rebuked him there. But it says that they cried out all the more, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. These men were bold, and they didn't let the crowds keep them from crying out to Jesus. So there's probably a lesson here, right? People can discourage us. The world can discourage us from really seeking Jesus, from crying out to him. They try to make us maybe feel foolish. They use what is human intellect or human wisdom to say, this Jesus he's not even really who he said he was, and they try to throw out all these proofs. But the crowd these men weren't discouraged by the crowds. They cried out all the more to Jesus. Verse 32 says, and stopping, Jesus called them and said, what do you want me to do for you? This had to have been so unexpected, right? Or maybe it wasn't at this point unexpected that Jesus would do this, because he often paid attention to those that no one else did. But the crowds wouldn't have paid attention to the blind men. They were just trying to get the blind men to be quiet. But Jesus pays them attention, actually asks them, what is it specifically? How can I help you? What is it specifically that you want? So they said to him, Lord, let our eyes be opened. They were asking for their sight. They wanted to be healed. And Jesus, in pity, touched their eyes, and immediately they recovered their sight and followed him. I don't like the word pity. I think a better translation would be compassion. And we see in other accounts that Jesus had compassion on folks. So I think compassion is better stated there. But Jesus heals them. They immediately have their sight, which would explain in part why there was crowds around Jesus, because he did heal. And there were people that hung around Jesus that really didn't trust in him, but they just were caught up in the moment, or they wanted to fit in with the crowds, whatever the reasons. But there were people who, having encountered Jesus, their life was changed forever. And these two blind men, the course of their life would never be the same. And it says that they followed him, meaning they became his disciples as well. I really am hoping that you have encountered Jesus and that your life, the course of your life, has been altered and changed forever. And for those who trust in the Lord, that is the plight of all disciples, again, who really trust in him. All right, next week, we're going to pick up the account where Jesus now is at Jerusalem. And we'll continue reading from there. But until then, be blessed.